like us being here in Houston and being Astros fans, we get it from every single opposing fan base about what happened in 2017 because of the cheating scandal and things like that. But in reality, Major League Baseball is manipulating baseballs.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that's an accurate
I know.
statement?
I think that is a completely fair conclusion to make based off. Really, this is year 3 of us finding multiple baseballs in the field.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Diamond Podcast here on the Apollo Podcast Network. Brian Lalima, Apollo Dez here with you. Our guest today, Bradford William Davis from Insider. You can look online at insider.com. Bradford, thank you so much for joining us. I know Dez and I are very appreciative of you taking your time. How are we doing today on a Wednesday?
Yo, I'm chilling, man. I mean, like literally, it's like 25 degrees when I woke up in New York today. So so quite literally, very chilling, cold, brick, whatever you want to call it. But I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think what is it outside for us today? Like 55?
Yeah.
Cold front just
cold
blew through.
55 today.
Yeah, man.
Cold
It
55.
was like
Cold 55.
yeah. It was 84 degrees just 2 days ago. So we're welcoming in this colder air. I wish
Y'all need to
it was
check your
25
Texas
here.
privilege right now, because I don't like that.
Yeah.
I said y'all need to check your Texas privilege, because I don't like this.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Cold 55.
Well, just wait. We get a half inch of snow and everything shuts down here in the state. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So again, Bradford, thanks for joining us. Obviously, we want to get into the work that you did in conjunction with Dr. Meredith Willis and the baseballs in Major League Baseball. The Goldilocks baseball, obviously the big name that's been floating around social media. Your articles that you guys worked on together. I think for me, just before we really dig into that, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you find yourself an insider and doing inside investigations, finding your way to doing some stuff for Major League, or looking into Major League Baseball and things like that? Just for our viewers and listeners, just tell us a little bit about yourself if you don't mind.
Sure. So, it all started with a tweet, honestly. 3 years ago, I was Tim Anderson, the White Sox shortstop, that got suspended for saying the N-word, actually. And so I was just like, I feel like this is like a little tone deaf, given that it's not like, him chasing down, someone through like the streets of Alabama. Like, but but it's a black man in a different context. And so I was posting about it. An editor of the New York Daily News was like, "Hey, you should write that as a column for us." I did. The column went viral, and so he hired me as a columnist. I'm obviously giving the very consolidated, truncated version, but that's that's kind of the come up. I worked as a sports columnist for the New York Daily News for a couple of years. Then 2020 hit, and all of a sudden I had all this time and no games with which to discuss, whether in any sport really. And so I just kind of like looked a lot at a couple of things. One was sort of the pro sports relationship to this growing social consciousness, going across everything from the NBA bubble to Major League Baseball and everyone holding that black rope on opening night, and all that stuff. But also looking into how the leagues are managing the pandemic, and I started pursuing a lot of investigative work there as far as like whether or not, particularly Major League Baseball, was following through one of the things that they said they would do in order to benefit the communities that they claim to serve as sort of like a quasi public trust. During the probably the darkest moments of the pandemic, because we didn't have any sort of vaccine or anything, and really didn't know what it was, and what I found was basically that wasn't true. They were not following through on things that they said they would do in their own protocol, including like giving out free tests to people, to like particularly I think essential workers, right, as we call them,
Right.
that summer. For the most part, and so we and so I started doing all this investigative work in my columns that fortunately got the attention of Insider, and and they had an opening on their investigative team, and so I joined there. Around that time, I started getting very close to Dr. Wills, and she's a brilliant person, a trained astrophysicist, a data scientist, and an expert knitter. So she and also loves baseball. So she was kind of the perfect person with which to try and understand what was going on in the baseball. She'd been writing a few different places, and I was like, "Yo, if there's ever opportunity to work together, let's do it." And so we started doing that the last couple of years.
What's when you're going through this investigative work, and this may just be general, but you have so much information and you have a story to tell. How do you go from A to Z and know when to layer in everything as you're working? I'm just generally curious on that because you have, I'm assuming it's almost paralysis by analysis because you almost have too much information at certain points.
It's extremely hard. I appreciate every help I've gotten in edits, in order to make what I know readable to the masses. It takes time, and I've gotten a lot of reps too. So because I've been thinking about this all year. I did a similar story last year about Major League Baseball using 2 different baseballs. This year was 3. I know we'll get into that soon, but so I've been rehearsing for years really on how to simply and concisely explain what is happening. So that helps a lot as well. And again, the input I get particularly from Dr. Wills as a scientist, but also a very strong and gifted scientific communicator as well, has been great as far as just kind of just running by hey, yo, does this sound right? Not like giving her my article, but just asking her yo, is this a good phrasing? And she is very helpful with that because she knows how to talk about this stuff too.
So how did the topic of the baseballs come to light for you and Dr. Wills? Obviously, us being here in Houston, Justin Verlander, he's now a Met, but he was with the Astros since 2017. He was outspoken about the baseballs, it seemed, year in and year out. I can remember, I had the privilege of one time asking him a question after a playoff loss in the clubhouse, and there was a home run that he gave up, and it was a little blooper that just somehow carried out, and he talked about the baseball. And here on Beyond the Diamond, we've talked about dead baseballs. We've talked about juiced baseballs. You can see it in the raw data. You can see it just from your eyes that there are baseballs that travel further or look like they travel further and balls that just don't go anywhere. So I'm curious with you, Bradford, and with Dr. Wills, how did you guys come together and say, hey, maybe we should dig into this a little bit more?
Well, Meredith had been digging in, to be clear. She had written a number of stories for The Athletic. I believe in early 2021, she had done something with Sports Illustrated about this. And so I knew what she was on. I can recall personally, again, I was at a Yankees playoff game in 2019 where it seemed like, it might have been actually against Houston, and it seemed like Didi Gregorius got enough to get over that short porch, but it didn't. It hit the warning track, and it might have been a 3-run home run, no grand slam. So some sort of back-breaking change the flow of the game, kind of hit. And everyone thought it was out except against the ball because it got in the warning track. And so I was that's weird. And I've been hearing anecdotally about players being this is weird, what's happening? Because in 2019 the ball had flown out more than ever before. And then I wouldn't say Rob Arthur over at Baseball Prospectus, he had not forensically even analyzed the baseballs like we did, but he had looked at drag data and saw that the ball had just not been carrying as much in October, and it can't be explained by just sort of weather or anything like that. But something regarding to the regarding the physics of the baseball. So so that was on my mind. Again, Meredith and I were building a good relationship, and I was just I'm at an investigative outlet where I have a lot of time where I could dig into things. It's not, back in the New York Daily News, I had, I was writing, almost daily, if not daily at times, sometimes multiple times a day. This is totally different being, having months with which to just kind of report something out and make sure I have the most thorough, accurate, measured, but clear explanation of what was going on. And that's had a lot of time on my hands. So it became a very good fit and a perfect partnership.
Yeah, I think the eyeball test just on the side where you're seeing it in game, and I even saw it earlier in 2017 when the Astros Dodgers World Series. There was the Game 5, infamous Game 5, where I think Puig literally stuck his butt out and threw his hands, and ball goes 355 feet. I'm there's no way a swing like that should happen, and yet here we were, and obviously in the World Series, and then you saw it over the last 5 years of all this data, and now there's so many Twitter accounts, there's so many independent places that have all that information, that data, and men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And you can see that something was happening, and we're appreciative of you guys bringing this to light, because now you said there's 2 balls in 2021, and now there's this 3rd ball that's introduced in 2023. How'd you guys get the name, the Goldilocks name? How did you guys, let's call it Goldilocks? Because we originally were going to dress up as Goldilocks, and
Yeah.
we were like, we were gonna
We had the
like play
plan,
the
but-
part, but we couldn't get the stuff in
Yeah,
in time.
and the cold front came in, so
Yeah.
we don't want.
Ah, man.
We were gonna
that
do
would have
it.
been too funny, yo.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, the way Major League Baseball adjusts their baseball is by raising or lowering the weight on the internally, right? Like the center weights and stuff like that. And so, with a heavier ball, with how Major League Baseball constructs their baseball, will travel further than a lighter ball. Why? It's because the balls are the same size. If you were to like raise the size of the ball, then it might like deaden. But by keeping it the same, it means the winding is tighter, comes off harder, and travels further. Off the bat when you make it a little heavier. And so our 2021 analysis saw that there was a heavier juice ball that was like consistent with like what the 2019 Rocket ball that kind of like had everybody hitting like a cleanup hitter. We saw those, and then we saw this ball that was like 2.5 grams lighter. That was the a deadened ball. And that's actually the one that Major League Baseball had said in a 2021 memo that got leaked by, I want to say, Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, that basically said, hey, this is the ball that, this is a manufacturing change that we want, and we believe that is going to be like meet the standards that we want for what baseball should be. Even though, both balls are, to be clear, legal and within the rules, like this one is like the spec that we want. And so so remember, heavier means more juice, lighter means more dead. This so-called Goldilocks baseball that we named is about a gram heavier than the dead ball. So it's like semi-juice, but it's kind of in the middle between dead and juice. So Goldilocks is not too hot, not too cold, just right. This is not too dead, not too light, not too heavy, not too dead, not too dead, not too juice, not too heavy, not too light. Just right. That's just kind of the jokey but hopefully sticky name. And this goes back to your question about how do you communicate science. It's like, we can't just say ball A, ball B, ball C, the 126 gram ball, the 122 gram ball. We need to like come up with names. And so Goldilocks was it.
That's perfect.
So after digging into the different types of baseballs, from what you understand or from how you look at it, what is the standard for baseballs in Major League Baseball?
Well, what Major League Baseball has committed to, at least in publicly, and that's that comes from I guess the latest public statement I can recall is one that Rob Manfred gave to me during the All-Star game this year in LA, was that the manufacturing change that that happened to deaden the ball is the one that Major League Baseball stands by. It's the only one they manufacture, and what they believe is consistent I guess it's achieved the consistency in its performance that they are okay with, and that is like a sort of a match between, again, what I'm saying, what Rob Manfred said during the summer, but also the 2021 memo that was sent out to the front offices, and again leaked through The Athletic. So that is what they have publicly committed to. Again, so it was quite interesting to find 36 baseballs that were manufactured in different weeks than the dead ball, but also a little bit heavier, which thus meaning, they travel better, and seeing a, systematic difference in, in the production that was not consistent with what MLB had said about the ball that they want.
So with the standard, is there a standard weight from what you understand and what you've uncovered and what you talked or what you read in that memo? Is there a standard weight that they commit to?
That is what the public statements that Major League Baseball, the public, or even if it's internal correspondence, but officially, I should say, that's the word I'm looking for. Have officially committed to is like this lighter, deader ball. And so that what was telling was to define something systematically heavier, in its weighted average.
And I guess where I'm going with my question is the lighter, deader baseball is essentially what every baseball should be that's put in play, correct?
That is what MLB says.
Correct, but that's not really from what you've uncovered, that's really not what's going on.
Absolutely.
And so it's like us being here in Houston and being Astros fans, we get it from every single opposing fan base about what happened in 2017 because of the cheating scandal and things like that. But in reality, Major League Baseball is manipulating baseballs.
Yeah, I mean,
That's an accurate
I know.
statement?
I think that is a completely fair conclusion to make based off. Really, this is year 3 of us finding multiple baseballs in the field.
And
Well,
it's
I
not
should say, I should say Meredith finding multiple baseballs in the
right.
field.
And
That's
I'm
probably what
not
we do.
and
Yeah.
what I'm saying by bringing up 2017 is I'm not trying to say that we're defending the Astros by any means. Like what they did, they got caught, and it's 5 years 5 years in the past. But what I'm saying is baseball is a game where everyone's trying to find a competitive edge, but then you have pitchers trying to find a competitive edge, but they're throwing juice baseballs that gives the hitter the advantage, and we can go on with cheating and finding competitive advantages. But then you've got Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred. They own Rawlings, and now they're manipulating baseballs for coming on 4 years now when we get into the 2023 season.
Yeah, no, I get the frustration as if you're as an Astros fan, given that you got I understand your fan base has this sort of load that comes from the 2017 and part of 2018 as well, evidence of cheating and sign stealing cheating. And I think and I wasn't surprised that Astros fans kind of locked onto it because it's proof that none of us are free from sin, I guess,
Right.
when you look at it that way. And so that is not me, as your priest absolving, the trash banging and all that, but just
Right.
that the truth is that there were two, and now there were this year in 2022 3 different balls that we have strong evidence we're circulating on the field of play this year, and so I think that should be a problem for everyone when you look at larger issues that could be very easily manipulated or corrupted into bigger problems. I mean, I think to close the loop on what we're both saying here is that I think it's very easy and arguably even preferred by Major League Baseball to sort of individualize corrupt behavior,
Yeah.
which does not absolve the corrupt behavior that the Astros exhibited, but
Right.
when you have 3 baseballs flying around, that opens you to a whole lot of, I think, very fair and valid questions as to whether or not you're engaging in corrupt behavior.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and Des, you can chime in on this too. Like the biggest thing that we've heard is, when the Astros were, banging on trash cans, they were ruining pitchers' careers. Like, pitchers that have been in the league 8-9 years, and they were trying to get a new contract, and they go out and they face the Astros, and they know what's pitch is coming. They're ruining careers, and then you bring in the betting aspect. Well, here we are. They're using 3 different baseballs this year. You know how many people probably lost money on certain games this season because of manipulated baseballs, and how pitchers are throwing juice baseballs, and how they're they're in contract years and so forth and so on. I mean, it just goes beyond just Major League Baseball manipulating baseball. It's a corrupt thing, in my opinion, because so many people had different things on the line. Bookies and people that are I hate lack of a better term, degenerate gamblers that lost money on bets, they have a complete bitch now for those games because of these baseballs. You think that's fair to say from everything that you've looked into?
I mean, I would imagine that, well, here's the truth, that when you use different baseballs that perform differently off the crack of the bat, you are in some way adding a new variable that changes the statistical environment with which bets are placed. If you are not transparent about that information with your betting partners, at the very least, so that's whether that's BetMGM, DraftKings, or the data companies that actually set the sort of actuarial lines. That's that is something that if I were trying to create the most accurate and fair but still ultimately advantageous line, I would want every single piece of data that could be available about how baseball is going to be played on any given day, right? At least just me, again, not a gambler, to be honest, but or someone who works in the gambling industry, I would want that. And so I can completely understand why what I found is gambling Twitter has also latched on heavily to these stories because it does potentially affect them. If especially if there is a unequal distribution of these baseballs, at least you can say okay, all 3 are totally random, which it certainly may be, but in our sample, we only found this new Goldilocks ball showing up in a couple of different places. And so that's, I think, again, not conclusive, but certainly a worthy question for people who have a financial stake in the statistical environment which baseball is played, which includes, of course, as you mentioned, pitchers and hitters,
Right.
And teams who are trying to build a roster as well, but also certainly the gambling industry.
Yeah, I think the big thing that kind of upset me, and it's just more the practice that almost a theory, because if you had a big free agent class coming up with, let's just say, 5 top arms, right, and they're going to be setting a high AAV and all these new records, it would be advantageous for the commissioner to put a juice baseball into circulation where those pitchers could be affected in a way where their numbers wouldn't be what they were in the past. And now they're free agents, and now you're almost kind of messing with their money. And now they have to usually do right by the union and get a high AV to set a market for everyone else behind them. And so, like, that's where it kind of creeps in, where I'm like, okay, what if it was a big hitters free agent the following year, and now there's nothing but dead balls, and the hitters stats are, affected across the board. And that's where kind of just really kind of rubs me the wrong way, with the sense of like how they can send balls to certain things. Obviously that would be like across a huge sample size of 162, which would be crazy data to have, but that's just kind of like the fear in the back of my head, because these guys work so hard. They're the best of the best at what they do in the top 1% of the world. But I want to circle back to the sample size that you guys had. In your article, you said you guys, I believe, had 200 baseballs, right? That's all you can work with what you can obtain and get. So I guess my question is, when you guys were doing your test to show it all, was it over, like, did you get all 200 baseballs at kind of at one time or throughout the year, or kind of how did you guys work through having when you're doing the experiment, for lack of better words, having good control and then doing your tests?
Yeah, we got the balls throughout the year, like starting opening day, I guess.
Okay.
Though I don't think we got any opening day baseballs, but but point being, just like we start a collection, around that time. Probably also looking into spring training as well. I got to check with Meredith to see, if she had any of that. But yeah, we're collecting baseballs throughout the year, and we already had clear sort of like buckets for what a juiced and what a dead ball, heavy or light was, because again, there are two ways in which to verify it. One is one is that they're when you average them out, the weights are heavier or lighter. But the other thing is that they are produced in Rollins' factory in different weeks, and the weeks do not overlap. So what that second part is really important for is showing that it is not just random variance. It's not like Rollins just like totally sucks in making baseballs. But that's not what that suggests. It suggests that there is a process change on certain weeks that leads to different baseballs being made. And so using that rubric, both of which are completely valid. We had already started to find, mostly the deader ball, some of the turbo juice ball, and then around mid-season we started finding like this other thing, and which we originally called Goldilocks, and then found a critical mass of which that showed that this was not just something weird or random, but but systemic in nature.
So, because in 21 we know there's two, right? The juiced and the dead. So the third one being kind of you guys finding that oh shit moment. What was that like for you guys? Because you're like you said there, you have your buckets, and then you're like, oh, there's now this new third bucket we didn't even know going into this year that now is there. What was that moment like when you're like, oh, like this is it?
Yeah, man. So I remember the first one we got was one of those was a home run derby baseball, right? And it was like, wow, this is really interesting, and Meredith was like, keep looking for them, because based on her understanding of manufacturing, because she's far more as steeped as you think I am, like she's even far more of a nerd about this stuff. And so based on the manufacturing trends in the past, it's not like they're just going to make one batch just for the home run derby. That's just not how Rawlings has historically worked. And so keep an eye out. But we hadn't, at least we hadn't to our knowledge, found any yet. We probably had gotten some, but again, the sample at that point was too noisy with which to definitively determine a trend. And then at the beginning of September, actually, I kind of had to put this project on the back burner, because I was working on another story of, frankly, of greater importance. I was working on a project on homicides of transgender people in the United States. And so, like, in the elevated, risks of violence, especially in recent years and all that, and just trying to like contextualize and understand that well. And so I was spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C., occasionally going to Nationals games and talk to sources and stuff, but mostly spending time just kind of like trying to honor and dignify, these folks' lives. And so I was not able to just kind of check in as frequently as I normally would because of that. But towards, the end of the reporting being done on that, I was able to check in again, and then I got a bunch of baseballs, and those were like, oh yeah, this is definitely different, and this is and it's different in the same way the home run derby ball was different. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, wow, we really have something now, and we need to like, try and find as many of those as possible. And so we were able to find 36.
So
which is
finding
which is about 18-20% of our sample.
So finding these three different baseballs, and you talked about the month of September. Obviously, down the stretch, there were two big home run chases in Major League Baseball. Albert Pujols chasing 700, and Aaron Judge chasing 62. I mean, they were breaking 61. Into what was it?
61 from Aaron.
Oh, sorry, 61, trying to get to 62.
Right.
Roger Maris's record, yeah. So they were. I mean, ratings were up. Obviously, they were breaking into college football games to
that's right.
Aaron Judge's chase of 61 and things like that. After all of your research and the article that you wrote, is it fair to say that Major League Baseball sent these Goldilocks or even juice baseballs to Cardinals games and to Yankees games?
So let's tackle the Cardinals part first. I have no data on the Cardinals this year.
No data on the Cardinals, nothing.
None.
Okay.
I would love some data on the Cardinals. If anyone here is listening and has baseballs from Cardinals games, particularly, sorry.
Let me ask you. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. But let me, before you go into your thing, could one assume that they were sending baseballs to the Cardinals?
I don't think we should assume at this point.
Okay.
Just trying to be as clinical and journalistic as possible here. I don't think we should assume.
Okay.
But I think that any sort of line of questioning when you have literally three baseballs flying around is like nothing is too crazy. I'm just trying, me as a journalist trying to be measured, not assume, but actually like seek out and do good research and then make, inferences or conclusions from that research. Right. And so,
fair enough.
And so, yeah. So anyway, that being said, but if anyone's listening, like, those are that's one of the few parks that we did not get, Busch Stadium, we did not get, balls from, and similarly, and just, to even clarify a little further, balls that would have been sent to Busch Stadium would include any game ball played at a Cardinals home game, right? Busch, batting practice taken by the Cardinals at home, or batting practice taken by the Cardinals on the road. Why the road? Because, and this is something I learned through reporting this year, is that as a normative practice, every team brings baseballs shipped to their home park with them on the road for BP and practice and stuff like that. So it's just totally normal and everything. So like a road, so that would count. So that would count as like a Cardinals ball, let's say, right? Does that make sense for everybody, here so far? But yeah, okay, cool. So then, as far as the Yankees, look,
absolutely.
What I cannot say, and we say this in our, when we make it clear in the article, we cannot say that Aaron Judge, any of his 62 home runs were necessarily hit off a Goldilocks baseball, right? Can't say that, or a juice ball for that matter. I don't have any Aaron Judge home run ball with which to dissect, and they all cost $1 million now. So once again, if anyone wants to send stuff to GoFundMe, or donate, their most valuable thing in their home to science, like I'm all ears, but like I totally understand if you don't. But that being said,
crowdfunding $1.6 million to place a bid.
Yeah.
What we can say conclusively is that the Yankees did play with Goldilocks baseballs, during the 2022 season, as well as some juice balls as well, which we got at Yankees games. And so that is conclusively 1,000% true. Like they had them. Again, that does not mean that other teams did not have them. In fact, if you recall if you read the article, you see that there are some balls with commemorative stamps on them. Meaning, like, say, for example, the Texas Rangers, had their 50th anniversary this year. And so balls with that 50 stamp, like we found a couple of those that were, made in Goldilocks weeks or Goldilocks weeks, whatever, so it's not to say that they didn't circulate anywhere else at all, because they did. But as far as balls that were completely unmarked and unstamped in any sort of way during the regular season, all of them were dead. Almost all of them were dead except for balls we found connected to the Yankees games. So that's So again, that's why I was saying not conclusive, but certainly notable within our sample.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
And I think. No, I'm just saying, like, the other side of this too is like the other team's playing with that ball in circulation as well, like during the game. So it's not like, it's like a power up XP for a certain player, like, like we said. It's just very interesting that
like theoretically everyone
shows,
gets them, right?
Correct.
IKF gets them,
yeah.
Like Isaiah kind of flipped, but he had 3 home runs, or whatever. Anthony Rizzo gets them, but Aaron Judge gets them too. And given that Aaron Judge was on a home run chase, and it was on pace for that, like pretty early in the year, like if that again, I know it's notable, to any person watching the game, and why it was worth sharing that the Yankees received them.
Right. So there was also a player from your article, Austin Slater of the Giants, wanted to send baseballs to be looked at. And he got a note from the Players Association saying, hey, kind of chill out on that, relax on that. We're not going to do that, because they got a note from Major League Baseball. When you found that out and you kind of dug into that a little bit more, what were your first thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And first, as a point of clarity, like I can't speak to the Players Association position. In fact, they didn't comment on the story as far as this, but what the way it was received to me in my reporting was that as a messenger, they were like, hey, this is something that Major League Baseball told us, right, to tell you. And that was from a high-ranking commissioner in the commissioner's office. Again, anonymized, but but trust me, very high. Excuse me, I misspoke. High-ranking commissioner, high-ranking executive within the commissioner's office. Anonymous, but still, trust me, very high-ranking. Who did message who messaged the union to message Austin, and I'm paraphrasing here. Hey, narrative science, we don't really trust it. Like, don't go with that. Like trust our labs over in UMass and in University of Washington. And by the way, if we find any balls that are going out to Meredith for, I guess, any sort of unauthorized third party, people might get fired. We might fire people. And so Austin's like, all right, message received, man. And so he shut down and did not, send any more balls. And honestly, shout out Austin Slater, man, for just being on the record about that. Like, because again, clearly Major League Baseball did not want him to work with Dr. Wills on this for whatever reason. And so but the fact that he, went on the record and was like, hey, this is a true thing that actually happened to me. Like when I attempted to be scientific about this. It was noteworthy because, he didn't want to get he didn't want to get clubbies or anyone else fired. I mean, like, they can't fire you. Can't fire a major leaguer like that. There is a union for that, for that matter. And he's a millionaire. So even if hypothetically they could fire him, he's coming from a different position than again, the guy who's shining his shoes or shining his cleats or whatever, who might have the fingerprints on the ball going out or something like that. So because of that, he just was like, I want to play it safe for their sake, not even for mine. And so, all the praise to Austin Slater for just operating with a lot of integrity here. And it worked. We didn't get any Giants balls except for one that actually Meredith happened to be in attendance at AT&T, and the person next to her caught a foul ball or something like that and just handed it to her, and that's our one Giants ball of the year. So, yeah, man, that's that's what happened with Slater, and I think again, one of the many things that I think completely deserves, I think provokes questions to Major League Baseball as to why they're so secretive about it.
Yeah, I think the thing, and I want to get your opinion on it. It just seems like Major League Baseball is always shutting down this concept and theory and all this, when they could just easily say, yeah, there's a new ball in circulation. Wouldn't that just them saying that out loud, like, hey, there's this new ball that's slightly heavier. It's obviously less than the juice ball that was in circulation and heavier than this dead ball and the Goldilocks ball. And they're just saying, like, this is maybe the new ball that we're introducing. Would that just would that appease everyone? I don't know. With the science community and you doing the story, and it just seems like every time you bring something to the table that shows that they're saying something different, they just try to shut you down.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for obviously the entire baseball watching community here, but I can speak for myself. I mean, I think it would be better to have some disclosure here about it rather than denying it as they have without providing uh, sufficient counter evidence to our claims and the data that we found. So that would be great. But ultimately, I mean, like I think when you have multiple balls circulating, like you're just going to be you're just dealing with problems right there. And that's like I'm just imagining like a counter sport analogy, like if like there were three basketballs floating around that do different things. And LeBron just happens to like one of them for his like handle or jumper or something like that. Like, people would be like, "What's
Right.
going on here?" In fact, if you forget like hypothetical analogies, when the NBA changed their basketball, like back in like 2006 or 2007 or whatever, people were incredibly upset about that. And it was the same manufacturer, just changed like I think it changed it to like a more synthetic, you know, whatchamacallit, material, on the outside, and people were pissed about it, and so they by mid-season they switched back to the old way of doing it, and then coming up this last year they switched ball manufacturers, and people were immediately reflexively angry about it. But however, the NBA spoke and worked with the NBPA, the basketball players union, a lot closer than Major League Baseball appears to be working with the MLBPA on this kind of stuff. And so there was at least some beta testing there. But even still, like, a couple of people, attested to their shooting percentages falling down, like Nikola Jokic, Paul George, were on the record complaining about the new basketball hurting their ability, hurting the feel on the jumper. So, I mean, that's even with like good advanced disclosure. So it wouldn't totally go away, but at least it would be like honest rather than like whatever the heck's going on right now.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the stuff that's going on with the basketball in the NBA and how they made a switch back to the original basketball because they, from what it seems like, listened to their players. And then you go to Major League Baseball and you've had several pitchers from 2017 on talk about the feel of the baseball, the weight of the baseball. Obviously, with going away from Spider Attack this year and pitchers complaining about it, the baseball being slick. And then you uncover there's now three different weighted baseballs in Major League Baseball. And you have a player come out and say, "Hey, I kind of want to get some research done on this baseball." MLB shuts that down and they don't listen to their players, but yet they still have all these different baseballs circulating in Major League Baseball. And it all comes back to Rob Manfred. I feel like Rob Manfred is always trying to mess with the game of baseball. There's experiments going on with pushing the rubber back half an inch or half a foot. There's going to be bigger bases. The shift is gone. There's a pitch clock. There's so many different changes coming in baseball. And it seems like Rob Manfred's at the top and he's tweaking with his game year in and year out. And now it's even more so with three different baseballs circulating.
Yeah. I mean, like for me, I am kind of agnostic to the idea of like trying to tweak the sport. First of all, again, the NBA and NFL do it a lot. And of course, there are people who complain about it too. But like, I think there's nothing wrong with a league trying to search for its like aesthetic ideal of what the sport should be. Like, just kind of like, and again, no offense, I promise not trying to shade Houston, but like the James Harden era of the Houston Rockets, where everyone was hitting threes and it was a mathematically advantageous thing to do, right? To just kind of chuck threes. But it's not like the prettiest version of basketball for a lot of fans. Yeah, and so like it's not like right, exactly. That kind of stuff. Even when it's mathematically advantageous, it's not like dope, and but having a little bit more mid range, that Carmelo jab step, again, you see my New York bias here. It's like it's really cool. And having diversity. That you can have Embiid, you can have Melo, and you can have Steph. And not just like everyone chucking threes in a low percentage. Similarly, so the NBA is like constantly thinking about how do we restore sort of like balance to the game. If MLB is doing the same thing, I think that's totally fine. I think the thing that's most important is disclosure. Just like keep it real about what you're doing. And what's happened with the baseball stuff, in our years of reporting, is that Major League Baseball like doesn't share this stuff publicly. And so, like, we ask questions, and then I'm like, "Oh yeah, we try to be honest about this, try to be transparent about this, but this is what happened." So, again, that first memo from the Athletic with that related to Meredith and I want to say Stephanie Apstein in Sports Illustrated's 2021 story about the 2020 season that was leaked. That was a leaked, correspondence that came out after, as they're doing reporting on it. Then our thing later that year, they admit, yeah, we used 2 baseballs, but like, again, even though they had claimed actually that they informed the union about it, no one I spoke to, no player I spoke to, including people in union leadership, were aware of it whatsoever. And then this year, they're adamantly denying it, but again, not providing, really sufficient counter evidence with which to undermine the data, that the hard, raw forensic data that we have, the same methodology that we used to prove it happened last year, that they even admitted to last year. So, it's just not, it's the disclosure that is the issue, not the attempt of like an ideal and perfect version of baseball. Because sometimes you get that right, sometimes you get it wrong, but just keep it real.
100%. And I wanted to ask you, just as a journalist, how do you feel about the response to your story? And now after, some breathing room from when you went live with it, would you do anything different on how you went live with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as far as like, I guess with the league response again, like, I mean, I'm pretty clear about, my perspective on it. I think like, they didn't provide evidence here, like including one of the things that he did was they shared 2 researchers that they work with in their partner labs at the University of Massachusetts Lowell and University of Washington. But I actually spoke with one of the researchers who had, said based on our evidence, we don't see multiple baseballs. And I asked them for questions about, I asked them to explain some of the methodology to us for the story. The person said he was not allowed to comment on it until he got approval from the league as to like how he was doing stuff, which is to me not very sciencey, just my opinion. But then he also went on. The one thing he was able to confirm, one of the few things he was able to confirm, was that he did not study balls in the postseason, and that's a big part of the story that we haven't even really discussed here. Is that what we found was that most of our postseason baseballs were this new Goldilocks one, like most, like 80% of them. And about half of our total Goldilocks sample within our larger sample of the year was sourced in the postseason. So what that tells me is that is they admitted, inadvertently or otherwise, that they were not studying the same data that we were. So of course the findings are different. The findings might be totally correct within the data they looked at, but it's the data they looked at. We looked at different data, and so we needed to sync on that to actually have a good and productive conversation about about the scientific merits of it, about what any of us are doing. And so so that's their response. But like, and so I would eagerly, want more collaboration here, more I would love to just make sure that they're studying the same things and we're studying the same things they're looking at, and see which methodology produce, if it's reproducible. That's the word I'm looking for. If the methodology that we're using is truly reproducible. So that's on the league and scientific response, or at least what they are, right? But then as far as the fan response, I mean, I'm super grateful that people were tapped in. I knew I had developed sort of a audience for this work from last year's study, going viral as well, but just not to the same extent. I think it's kind of funny to see some of the jokes and memes that emerged from it. Like obviously getting asked when Twitter was on fire. All the people who had assumed, because I was at the winter meetings when it dropped, that I was like in sync with John Heyman to depress Aaron Judge's free agency value or something like that. Hilarious, me, my best friend John Heyman, but, working on that. No, obviously not. It was just funny timing. If I could have had my druthers, I would have had it out that morning just so that it could have a little more room to breathe, because there was a press conference with Manfred later that day, and I would have loved to be able to actually ask questions, germane to the article, but I couldn't because I didn't have it out yet. So, but anyway, with that said, like, I'm super grateful for everyone who's read, who tapped in, who's asked questions. And I think the one thing that we would like to do, besides just kind of just natural follow-ups on some of the things we learned, in this, is, it's just kind of like, to whatever extent we can, share as much about our methodology as possible, And so there are some like things that we have to be careful with, because, one is making sure that our sources are not revealed. Clearly the Austin Slater thing is a big deal. And so we have to make sure, that they can't track back, to any person who provided, a ball to us, or, and so we want to be, super, super careful with that. But like, yeah, but we want, but disclosure really matters, and we want to just, and so one of the things that we will explore is just kind of, again, like what else can we share, if anything, about stuff, and really even just also defining terminology again, like what is the Yankees ball, because that was a big question we had, like what does that mean? And so I explained on this podcast, it's a ball in game, a ball, a home BP game, for the Yankees, or a road BP, game, hit by the Yankees, or whatever. So BP being bad practice. And so, to whatever degree we can make sure that everyone is working on the same definitions when we talk about this stuff, maybe anything we explore in the future as well.
So what are your plans for the 2023 season in regards to baseballs? Are you going to do another study like you did in 2021 and 2022?
Well, hey, listen, send us balls. We want to know if we, clearly, I think there's a need for sort of outside voices as to what's happening with the baseball. I firmly believe that. I think it's totally fair to say. So, we're going to continue to try and do the best we can to pay attention to that. So, to whatever degree a listener, who's tapped in here is like, curious about this stuff, like one of the best things you can do is simply send us baseballs, either from this year, from whatever park that you call home, or any road trips you took, and certainly, next year if you ever, get a foul ball from, I guess, Austin Slater or something, just to let us, let us know. And if you're able to part with it, like that could be really useful for just kind of continuing the momentum and continuing to work. And so that's something I can safely say, something we love to continue doing to whatever extent we can, so long as we don't get anyone in trouble that they don't want.
Yeah, I know we're pushing up on time, and we'll wrap up here shortly. I just had a question, just kind of two-part. One, have you had any pushback from the league office after going live with this, you or Dr. Willis? And then two, for all the investigative journalists that are out there that are in college, and that's something when they do, any words you want to give to them, because what you're doing is pushing the boundaries and bringing stuff to light, and that's always not. There's always going to be roadblocks when you're doing the right thing. So just kind of some words for them, for the people that are inspiring to be like you.
Yeah, I mean, I see Rob's face when I ask him questions. So I'm sure you don't really rock with me. That's fine. Like, I'm not, I haven't received a severed horse head on my bed yet. For doing anything, if you watching that topic. But so it is what it is. Again, mostly the response has been very positive. Again, from people around the league, especially players, who have been, who are really truly the subject matter experts, even more than Meredith, because they feel it. They feel these baseballs literally every day, and sometimes they recognize when something's wrong in their hands. And so,
right.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to provide that service to kind of anyone who has a financial or emotional stake in what baseball is, and how it should be played. So that's that. And then as far as for journalists just in general, or kids in college who like me, frankly, are trying to figure out what the heck they want to do, because again, I only got into this full-time credential 3 years ago off of a tweet with about something I didn't like. And so, man, if you're listening to this, you are probably a big sports fan. And the world of sports it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And wherever there's money, there is problems. There are not a lot of independent media that pursue an accountability lens, with the world of sports. Unfortunately, I mean, first of all, there's not a lot of independent media, period, especially in the world of sports. Everything is either owned by, say, a rights holder. So, whether you're watching, I guess Bally's or or the Yes Network or for the Yankees or SNY or ESPN for that matter, which has some church and state, but still makes a lot of money off of their partnerships with all these different leagues. There's just not a lot. There are not so many opportunities for that. But what that also means is that the door is wide open, because it's a huge industry and people care about it. And so if you're able to, if you know something that feels off in the sport that you love or care about, there are probably so many scoops that you could pursue if you have a little bit of time with which to go after them. And that's what I found as well. Again, the same thing happened to me in 2020. I just had a little bit of time with which to dig deep, to think very carefully and critically about things that Major League Baseball was saying, and to see if they were doing them. When I was looking into, again, the public health stuff and whether or not they were giving COVID tests, it required just me calling public health offices all around the country to ask, hey, anything going on with that? And then also calling the teams as well to see if they can confirm or deny it. And so if you have the time and hopefully you guys, people on the come up, if you got an internship or a job, that gives you a little bit of time to think very critically about, again, the sport that you love and care about. Like, man, go for it, because there's so much out there. There's so many bodies, under the floor that no league, wants you to know about, and you should be, and though again that's discouraging, it should, I think, for someone who's got that sort of like journalistic impulse, that should motivate you, encourage you, inspire you to go after it, And then the last thing I'll say too is that accountability comes in many forms as well, and it can come in the form of a hot take that is well written and well reasoned. But I'm grateful that I've had the ability in my career to be able to do kind of both, and sometimes even meld the two together.
Amen. That's powerful.
That's good stuff. Bradford, we're coming up on time. We want to be respectful of your time, but thank you so much for joining us, man. I found your article extremely interesting and helpful with what we've kind of come to know of different baseballs floating around Major League Baseball. So I appreciate all the work you and Dr. Meredith Wills working together and putting all this information together for sports fans like us and for others out there that are going to be watching this and listening to this, that obviously that follow you on social media and read your article. So again, thank you for all the time, man. We really appreciate it.
Yo, my pleasure. Please, I'm around. Hit me up next time you want someone on this subject or anything else, man. I'm happy to talk. So anyway, thank you. I really, really had a good time.